Most people believe that the Second World War was won by tanks, battleships, and millions of soldiers fighting across Europe. They picture massive invasions, endless trenches, and skies filled with bombers. But what if one of the greatest turning points of the entire war wasn't a battle at all? What if it began with a single piece of paper carrying a message so dangerous that only a handful of people were ever allowed to read it? Hidden inside that message was information capable of changing military strategy, saving thousands of lives, and quietly altering the course of modern history. For decades, the public had no idea it even existed. Some historians argue that this secret message became one of the most valuable weapons the Allies ever possessed. It didn't explode like a bomb or roar like a fighter plane. Instead, it traveled silently through hidden intelligence networks before landing in the hands of Britain's wartime leader, Winston Churchill. The moment he understood what it contained, everything changed. Decisions were made differently. Battles were approached differently. Even entire military operations began to shift because of what those few pages revealed. Yet the most astonishing part is that millions of people fighting the war never knew this invisible battle was taking place behind the scenes. Before we uncover exactly what that mysterious letter contained, I want you to imagine yourself in Churchill's position. You're leading a nation under constant attack. Every day, enemy bombs fall from the sky. Food is rationed. Cities burn at night. Every decision you make could mean life or death for thousands of people. Then one morning, someone places a confidential document on your desk. It contains information so sensitive that if the enemy discovers you've read it, one of your greatest secret advantages could disappear forever. Would you act immediately? Or would you protect the secret, even if innocent people might suffer in the meantime? As you watch, think carefully about the choices these leaders had to make. If you had been standing in that room with Churchill, knowing what he knew, what would you have done? Would you risk exposing your greatest intelligence secret to save lives today? Or would you keep silent in hopes of saving even more lives tomorrow? Share your answer in the comments before we reveal how history unfolded, because there is no easy answer. And that's exactly why this story continues to fascinate historians decades later. By the summer of 1940, Britain stood on the edge of disaster. Much of Europe had already fallen under Nazi control. Poland had been crushed. Denmark and Norway had surrendered. Belgium and the Netherlands had collapsed with shocking speed. France, once considered one of Europe's strongest military powers, had fallen in only a matter of weeks. Adolf Hitler appeared unstoppable. Across the continent, German forces seemed almost impossible to defeat. Every newspaper carried grim headlines, and many believed Britain would soon become the next victim. The British people lived under constant fear. Families rushed into underground shelters whenever air raid sirens echoed through the streets. Children were evacuated from cities, uncertain if they would ever see their parents again. Every night, bombers crossed the English Channel, dropping explosives on homes, factories, and ports. Smoke covered entire neighborhoods while firefighters struggled to control endless blazes. Yet despite overwhelming pressure, Britain refused to surrender. Churchill repeatedly reminded the nation that giving up was not an option, even when the future looked darker than anyone could remember. While ordinary citizens focused on the destruction above ground, another war was unfolding behind locked doors inside government buildings. This conflict involved no tanks, no fighter aircraft, and no artillery. Instead, it was fought with pencils, notebooks, intercepted radio signals, mathematical formulas, and extraordinary patience. Intelligence officers, linguists, mathematicians, engineers, and codebreakers worked around the clock, believing that hidden inside enemy communications were clues capable of changing everything. They knew that every intercepted transmission might contain information more valuable than an entire army division. At first glance, these intercepted messages looked completely meaningless. They appeared as endless strings of random letters and numbers with no obvious pattern. To almost everyone who saw them, they were impossible to understand. But the experts knew better. They believed every coded transmission represented real military orders being sent somewhere across Europe or the Atlantic Ocean. If they could unlock those secrets before the enemy carried them out, Britain might gain precious time to prepare, defend, or even launch successful counterattacks. The challenge was enormous because Germany relied on one of the most sophisticated encryption systems the world had ever seen. Military commanders trusted it completely. Every day, thousands of coded messages crossed the airwaves, directing submarines across the Atlantic, coordinating fighter squadrons, organizing troop movements, and supplying commanders with fresh orders. German leaders believed their encryption machine made these communications impossible to read. That confidence became one of their greatest strengths, but it also planted the seeds of one of their greatest weaknesses. Hidden away at a quiet country estate known as Bletchley Park, some of Britain's brightest minds were working against impossible odds. They came from remarkably different backgrounds. Some were university professors, others were crossword puzzle champions, chess masters, language experts, engineers, and mathematicians. Few had military experience, yet they shared one extraordinary mission: break Germany's supposedly unbreakable codes before time ran out. Long before sunrise and often well past midnight, they worked through endless pages of encrypted text, testing theories, searching for patterns, and refusing to accept defeat. The pressure inside Bletchley Park was unlike anything most people could imagine. Every hour mattered. If a message wasn't solved quickly enough, the information inside might become useless because enemy forces would already have carried out their plans. Sometimes the codebreakers spent days chasing false leads, only to discover they had been heading in the wrong direction. Other times, a tiny breakthrough suddenly unlocked dozens of messages at once, revealing astonishing details about German operations. The work demanded incredible concentration, relentless determination, and a willingness to keep trying even after repeated failure. Then came a moment that would later become the subject of countless debates among historians. Among thousands of intercepted communications, one particular message stood out. At first, it looked no different from the others, just another collection of coded symbols waiting to be deciphered. But as the codebreakers gradually unlocked its contents, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. This wasn't a routine battlefield report or a simple supply request. It contained information with the potential to influence decisions at the very highest levels of government. Within hours, the decoded intelligence began moving through Britain's tightly guarded intelligence network, eventually making its way toward Winston Churchill himself. Nobody in that chain could have predicted just how profoundly its contents would shape the war that followed. When the decoded intelligence finally reached Winston Churchill, it did not arrive with fanfare or dramatic ceremony. It was delivered through one of the most secure intelligence channels in Britain, handled only by people who understood the enormous responsibility resting on their shoulders. Churchill had already become accustomed to receiving military reports every day, but this one was different. The information wasn't based on guesses, rumors, or battlefield observations. It came directly from the enemy's own communications. If it was accurate, and every indication suggested it was, it offered a rare glimpse inside Germany's military thinking. Churchill reportedly understood immediately that this was more than intelligence. It was an opportunity that had to be protected at all costs. The message revealed far more than the location of enemy forces. It exposed how German commanders intended to move, when they expected to strike, and where they believed they held the advantage. For military planners, this was like seeing several moves ahead in a game of chess while the opponent remained unaware. Yet possessing this knowledge created a dangerous dilemma. If Britain responded too perfectly to every German plan, the Nazis would eventually realize their communications had been compromised. That would almost certainly lead them to change their encryption methods, destroying one of the Allies' greatest advantages. Churchill and his advisors faced an impossible balancing act, using the intelligence wisely without revealing the secret behind it. This invisible struggle became just as important as the battles taking place across Europe and the Atlantic. Britain's commanders learned that restraint could sometimes be more valuable than immediate action. There were moments when they deliberately avoided reacting to information they already possessed because protecting the intelligence network promised even greater victories in the future. It was an agonizing strategy. Every delayed response carried risks, and every decision weighed heavily on the leaders responsible for the nation's survival. Their choices were measured not only in military success but also in the lives that might be lost if they acted too soon. Behind these remarkable achievements stood the men and women of Bletchley Park, many of whom remained completely unknown to the public for decades. They worked in silence, bound by strict secrecy that continued long after the war had ended. They couldn't tell their families what they did each day. They couldn't celebrate their successes in public. Even when Allied victories made headlines around the world, the people who helped make those victories possible quietly returned to their desks to tackle the next stream of encrypted messages. Their reward wasn't fame. It was knowing that their work was helping to save lives. One of the greatest misconceptions about the Second World War is that victory depended solely on overwhelming military strength. The truth is far more complicated. Intelligence repeatedly gave Allied commanders precious time to prepare for attacks, redirect supplies, protect shipping routes, and anticipate enemy movements. Convoys crossing the Atlantic became safer because naval commanders often had advance warning of submarine activity. Air operations grew more effective because planners understood where German defenses were strongest. These advantages rarely guaranteed success, but they dramatically improved the odds. In war, even a small advantage repeated hundreds of times can become decisive. Germany, meanwhile, remained remarkably confident in its encryption system. Military leaders trusted that their coded communications were completely secure, believing no enemy possessed the technology or expertise needed to read them. That confidence encouraged commanders to rely heavily on radio messages, unknowingly providing the Allies with an extraordinary stream of information. It was a costly assumption. History repeatedly shows that overconfidence can become a weakness disguised as strength. In this case, faith in an unbreakable code gradually